Okay, so fractions are one of those things that we've talked about, that you have talked about in many grade levels. So I'm just going to do a quick little review of what they are and what the numbers mean and what we call them and all of that. So we have our line, we have our top number and our bottom number, right? So my top number is called my numerator. And my numerator is going to tell me the number of pieces I'm talking about. That might mean how many pieces are shaded. That may be how many pieces are unshaded. That may be how many pieces were eaten. Any of those things, this is just the number of pieces I'm talking about. Now, my bottom number is called my denominator. I think of denominator as down. That helps me remember that my denominator is my bottom number. And my denominator tells me the number of pieces I need to make a whole, or to make one. So if I'm talking about pizza, I'm thinking, how many pieces does it take to make that whole pizza? So I'm going to go ahead and draw a pizza, okay? And if you notice, see, there are 4 parts to make that whole. So here there's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces to make that whole pizza, but I'm only talking about 3 of them. So I'm just worried about 1, 2, 3 pieces. Okay, now when we're talking about a problem like this, you have to remember something that I have to think of first anyway, is I always think, how many does it take to make a whole? That's what I want you to think of first. And I know it's kind of backwards because you're thinking about your denominator, but the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, how many to make a whole? Okay, and then after you ask yourself that question, then you can say, how many pieces am I talking about? If you ask yourself those questions in that order, it will really help you here in the next lesson that we're about to do, because sometimes you may be talking about more than just having 4 pieces. That you may have 5 or 6 pieces, but it still only takes 4 to make one. So I want you to think first, how many to make a whole, and that's your denominator. Remember, that is your bottom number. And then how many pieces are you talking about? So ask yourself both of those questions every time you see a fraction. Anytime you see a fraction on anything, my expectation is that you label it. What fraction is that? Even if that's not what the question is asking. If you see a fraction, you need to label it. So if I see a picture that looks like this, the first thing I do probably, even before I read the question, is go ahead and label that as 2 out of 6. I've got 2 shaded and there are 6 that make that one whole piece of pizza. Okay. Sometimes you'll get some odd fractions, especially when you've got an odd number as your denominator. It's a little bit harder to draw. But if you see a number of a fraction, say they give you 4/8, and then they're asking you about something about 4/8, go ahead and draw the picture. Now, does it have to be a circle? No. The only thing that has to be true is that you have to have even pieces. And so sometimes that's a little bit easier to draw in a circle. Sometimes it's easier to draw in a square. But you do have to think about all of your pieces have to be even. So, especially when it comes to like those bigger fractions. So like there's 6ths. And with a fraction like 2/3, it might be easier to draw it in a rectangle or a square. So anyway, I think that's all I need to say about reviewing for fractions. Please just remember to ask yourself the question, how many does it take to make that whole circle or that whole rectangle? Or even that whole set. Sometimes they may say that there are 4 balls in, or 4 marbles in a bag, and 2 of them are purple. What fraction is purple? That's still going to be 2/4. Okay? Because there's 2 out of the 4. It can be out of a set also. So, there you go.